Hello and welcome back to the Football Fellowship podcast. My name is Mevin,
And my name is Toby.
and today we're going to be reviewing Game Week 2 in the Premier League, which had a lot of goals, a couple of red cards, and a few VAR controversies as well. But yeah, how have you found it, Tobes?
Yeah, it's been a really good week. We've been blessed with it. We've had the backstage of the Women's World Cup, semi-finals and final, Super Cup, and a whole weekend of Prem to look at as well.
Yeah, very exciting, a lot of football. But first, obviously, we've got to start with the Women's World Cup. Commiserations to England, who lost 1-0 in the final. Congratulations to Spain, it should be said as well. What did you make of the game?
It was a bit of a classic final, I'd probably say, quite cagey, especially from England's side. I think Spain did deserve to win, having watched the game and having looked back at the stats as well. Spain with 13 shots to England's 8, 57% of the ball, and an 81% pass completion compared to England's 72, where I think is the key where Spain won it, really. They dominated the ball, and I think England really struggled to keep a hold of the ball when they needed to. 15 interceptions for Spain as opposed to England's 8. We gave the ball away quite a lot, which was a shame to see. Yeah, I think it was just a case of they were the better side. Their midfield was really strong. Bob Matty obviously getting player of the tournament, deservedly so. She was fantastic. And then Hermoso and Abeluera next to her just dominated, really. They played it around Toon and Stanway. And yeah, we had a few chances. We obviously hit the bar. Hemp hit the bar, which was a shame. Yeah, I think second half we did try to get a bit more of the ball, which is where Wiegman wanted to change from the 3-back that she was playing in the last few games back into the back 4 that we saw at the start of the tournament. Russo coming off, I was a bit disappointed to see.
Yeah, that was the one where I was like, we've got a focal point up top, someone to target, and it kind of felt like we just lost all of our attacking outlet and kind of felt a bit disjointed. And that was the one where, in hindsight, I was just like, well, even at the time, I was saying to myself, why have you taken her off of all of them? And it was quite disappointing. And we never really brought that momentum back until maybe the last few minutes, but even then it was too late. I was throwing everyone there.
Yeah.
And naturally, Spain would naturally be sitting back anyway because they're just trying to keep the 1-0 lead.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, it's no disrespect to playing Hemp up front, but I think she works much better either on the either side of a front three or alongside another striker. Russo's obviously that taller, stronger player, like you said, a focal point, which would have been nice to see when they were going to the fullback. And then, yeah, I think obviously we had the penalty save, which was great, and I think it really got me gassed. I was like, yes, we can actually come back and do this now, and then it almost fell flat straight away again. Our press had really dropped, and Spain kept theirs up really well pretty much the whole game and just suffocated us when we wanted to try and play with the ball.
Yeah, I really thought after that penalty save that, this could be a defining moment in the game. It's going to be a massive momentum swing. It's a massive wake-up call if you needed one in the final. But I thought after that, okay, come on, you can really go for it now. And Spain would be deflated after, the high of getting a penalty and thinking, the 2-0 lead in the final. And then you sit back and you just let England try their best and play in front of you and don't let them get in behind. But they didn't take it. Fantastic save. I was a bit worried initially when I saw it because I thought she might have been off her line.
Yeah, same.
But then I saw it back and I was like, okay, no, it's fine. Josh managed to keep her, I think it was her right foot on the line, which is great. But yeah, I'm not too happy with the referee. I mean, I know people didn't want to blame the referee. I think she was fine for most of the game, but I did think that Parallel should have been sent off for that second yellow. The fact that she just kicked the ball into the stands, and it almost looked like the ref was going to book her.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh no, she's already got a yellow, can't give her another one. And it's kind of like, yeah, it just felt like, that's just it's a final.
I think that might have been what it was. I think she was probably thinking, do I want to almost like make the headlines and to give the second yellow, even though I think nobody would have disagreed.
Yeah.
But I suppose when it is a final and it's getting that second yellow for something like that, it is a big call to make. And I suppose it was one of those she didn't want to sort of maybe even overshadow the game by making an interesting second yellow like that.
Yeah. But they were willing to give a penalty through VAR. So, in the end, they're willing to make big decisions. But I just think that one they might have got wrong.
Yeah.
Not being bitter.
Not that it was like Spain's best player, Ballerino, who was... I think England was scared of her every time she got the ball. She was really... You could see it when they were really looking for a lot of the time, and then is England backing off, and she was such a good dribbler. Young player of the tournament as well.
Yeah, they were really good. And commiserations to England. There's always next time. Obviously, we've got the men's Euros to look forward to as well this summer. So hopefully it will be coming back again.
And then the women's Euros, which they obviously are the holders for.
They are the holders for, yeah.
After that, so
Yeah. But they did a really good job, and I think we're all very proud of them.
Yeah, it's been a great tournament.
So from one team doing really well to one team that did not do so well on the weekend was Manchester United, who went into a game against Spurs, which you thought they would have won, but they lost 2-0 in the end.
Yeah, it was. Spurs played really well. I was almost going to say surprisingly well, but I don't think so. After we saw against Brentford, they had some really good sparks there. They kept the ball really well, and again, they had 56% share of the possession, which Postecoglou is really trying to push for them to have. I think maybe watching the game, it seemed like Spurs dominated, but looking at the stats, it might have actually been a bit more even maybe than I thought. Man United actually had an XG of over 2 compared to Spurs, who were just under 2, and they were quite unlucky a lot of the time. In the 30th minute, that Vicario save, looking back at the stats, it was a 0.92 expected post-shot, which shows how good that save was. United could have had a penalty.
What did you make of that?
To be honest, I thought it was.
Yeah.
I think I completely understand why Ten Hag was pretty mad after the game, and I think especially when that was 0-0 for them to get a penalty, getting that first goal can really change the game. But then after carrying watching the game, Spurs probably should have had one as well, so kind of evens out.
Yeah. It's funny because I actually thought both decisions were wrong. I think both teams should have had a penalty because I know that they've changed the handball rule again this season, so now they're trying to be a bit more lenient towards it. But I did think when Romero approached the ball, his arms were already out, and then his arms remained out and made no sign of retracting away from the ball, and that's when I was like, that's a pen. And then for the second one, I also thought I thought initially it's like, oh, Martinez has been too strong for him, and there's no way that should be a penalty. Then again on the highlight, I saw he didn't get any of the ball at all.
No.
It was more knee collision than actually like strength shoulder to shoulder, and I was like, I thought that should be a penalty as well. But I do know what you mean about on reflection. It looked like United had a lot of good chances, and they did, because if you watch the highlights back, like 3 or 4 minute highlights, you'll see the Rashford chance where Vicario made a fantastic save, which you mentioned. You'll also see the two headers, the one from Bruno where he reboners it to Rashford, which is a brilliant bit of skill. And then you see the second one when it's Bruno on the end, and he completely puts it wide and high, I think. And then you think to yourself, United are on the up, but then there's actually Spurs, who I thought in the second half absolutely dominated the game. I think you had Pedro Porro had a shot at the end of the first half, hit the post, and I think a deflected effort from the right hand side, which actually hit Martinez, then went onto the post. And then it was that midfield who just absolutely dominated Man United's midfield, which on paper, the Casemiro, Mount, Fernandes compared to Basuma, Sarr and Maddison, you only think there's going to be one winner in that midfield, but it actually turned out to be Spurs.
Yeah, Basuma I think was one that we sort of highlighted at the start of the season, one to look out for whilst Spurs are transitioning into this new system, a bit more solid. And we said last week it was Skip maybe not being as dynamic as we would have wanted, and then Sarr coming in, who played really, really well. I think he got man of the match. But yeah, they completely bossed it. Mount was a bit of a passenger in that game, really. Didn't stand much of a chance against them. But even Casemiro, compared to what we're used to seeing, just completely dominated by those two sitting.
Yeah, and I do want to say this about Mason Mount, because I've seen a lot of stick for him online. And I think some of it's fair, but other bits of it I think is just far too harsh. Because if this was a new foreign player coming to the league, you'd say, give him time, they're still adapting to the league, learning the new ways the manager wants them to play. But because it's Mount, he's English, we've seen him play a lot for Chelsea, there's already this preconception of a lot of people have made that he's going to be terrible, he's not going to fit. And even though he hasn't started off well, I don't think he started off horribly, but people are giving him a lot of stick. And I do think, and we're going to come on to him a bit later on, Raheem Sterling for Chelsea, who I thought had a fantastic game. Don't write players off immediately. They might have a bit of a lull, like we saw Mount last year, and we might be seeing at the beginning of this year. But give him a bit of time. I don't think it helps any player when they're low on confidence and low in form, when they get criticised massively, and I think it might be an over the top than what they deserve. Even though, despite the fact he's obviously come from rival, big fee, big name player. But yeah, I do agree that the midfield got absolutely dominated. I think Casemiro also had a very poor game, but that hasn't been mentioned as much. And And it wasn't just this game, it was Wolves as well, in which Casemiro got dominated. And I think it's 2 games in a row now, and it's not what you expect from a player who's at the world class caliber that we expect from him, which I think is a bit disappointing. When you're getting outrun by Basuma and Sarr, it's really not good showing for you. But then on the other hand, for Spurs, I mean, it just goes to show like what was Conte doing, not playing Basuma more often when he was fit, and then Sarr he had on the bench a lot of the time as well. And these two players are now seem to be doing absolute wonders for Spurs.
Yeah, I think in terms of Mount, it's more credit to how Sarr and Basuma plays as opposed to how badly he played, because we're saying the same for Casemiro as well. Didn't have the best game, and we know how good Casemiro has been for United last season. Yeah, Casemiro only 29 out of 55 passes, only the 1 interception, and only 4 out of 9 duels in the game, and he did get dominated. But on the Spurs front, for how well they played, I think Son looked a lot brighter. I think it was almost a polar opposite to his last game, where I really thought he struggled and he didn't get in the game as much as you would expect from their captain and their talisman almost.
Yeah, well, I even said that I thought Perisic, when he came on against Brentford, did better than him.
Yeah, and I'm not sure whether that was more because Maddison was playing a little bit more centrally. It seemed quite a lot of time in the Brentford game, Maddison was drifting out left, and I think it was taking over Son's space a bit. But in this game, it seemed Son started way further out and then started to drift in, as opposed to waiting around in those half spaces. And he had some really nice runs, created a lot of, not direct chances, but a lot of his moves were creating chances for Spurs, which was really good to see.
Yeah, and I think he's going to be such an important player. Didn't get a goal, and I don't think he got an assist either. But just like you said, his general play was so much better, and he's going to be so crucial, being the captain of the club and being the main focal point and main threat for opposition to worry about. Especially because I thought Richarlison again didn't have the best of games. I think he's really struggling to. I think in this game he struggled to actually get the chances as well, which you would expect playing Man United is going to be a bit harder, but what we're saying, even though despite he didn't score last week, he was getting the chances. This week he didn't get the chances and he looked even worse. And I think him throwing a bit of a strop here and there, I think he might struggle with Ange Postecoglou, because I don't think he's going to be a manager that's going to take any of that nonsense. I think I maybe saw Richarlison throw his hands up in the air, and the camera panned straight away to Postecoglou, and I just saw like a little twitch, and I was like, that's enough to irk him. And
Yeah.
it's going to be really interesting to see who Spurs sign in the transfer window, because they're going to have to sign someone, because I don't think at this moment that they can go a whole season with Charlison.
No.
And maybe he'll prove me wrong, but I don't know. I don't think he's the one for them. But to finish off on Spurs, I think what's really important was they kept a clean sheet, because there's been a lot of talk about Vicario coming in to replace the captain of the club, Hugo Lloris. A lot of talks about Porro and Udoji. They're 2 high-flying wing-backs, really. But how they're going to play in the back four, they're now playing inverted as well. I thought they did really well. Mickey van der Ven, the new centre-back coming to the league, how's he going to cope with the physicality? And I think keeping that clean sheet, they really had a good performance.
Yeah, I agree. On the Man United front, do you think it was maybe a case of they were unlucky in the first half, or do you think there was something wrong with them in the second half? Because we saw against Wolves, they did get quite easily ran through in the midfield. Matheus Cunha had a fantastic game, but a lot of the time he had just had so much space to run through. Where do you think United can sort of fix this? They've got Forest at home next week.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I think they will respond against Forest, because again, like we'll come to Forest later, but I think they'll be easy to get at. But I will say it's the fact that they didn't keep a hold of the midfield runners. They kind of just let him go, especially Sarr for that first goal. The way I think every single one of the midfield players has a glance at him, and then as he runs past them, and I think that's just purely unacceptable. And I think defensively, you'll be extremely worried if you're Eric Ten Hag watching that, just putting the performances they put in. I do think there's also a system thing in the fact that Rashford is playing up front and he's not quite suited for that. He even says he doesn't really want to play up front, so I'm not questioning his motivations, but I just don't think naturally his heart isn't 100% in it. I think he wants to play on the left or the right at a push. I do think they're really relying on Højlund to come back into the side, but I do worry about if you're putting that much pressure on the lad to come in. He hasn't even played a competitive game yet for a game regardless for Man United, competitive or not. So to just be like, we need Højlund to come back in, is a lot of pressure on him, especially when it's unsure how well he's going to do in the new league. So I do think they'll be fine, but it does pose a question of, if you reflect on last year when they started really badly against Brighton and Brentford, 2 teams who ended up having a really great season, but again, they haven't started off great. Is this just maybe a thing that Eric Ten Hag teams are going to do? I don't know. I don't know how his teams in Ajax did, but it's another season where they haven't started well.
Yeah, I think it's 2 games to sort of look back on and see where things went right, because I still think there was a lot of things that did go well for them. I don't think Man United fans need to exaggerate the problem and say, do the classic like they did last season, the club's in turmoil, blah, blah, blah. I think not even when Højlund comes back from injury, just opposed to if they can have a look where things went wrong, maybe try and sort out that midfield problem that they're having at the moment. And it might also be potentially their press at the front might just not be as effective as it needs to be to stop those runners coming in from deep. But yeah, Forest at home next week, I think that'll be a big game for them. If they can get a comfortable win there, get a lot of their confidence back, and they should be fine going forward.
Yeah, well, I don't even think the performance matters too much because, I mean, they beat Wolves 1-0. I mean, arguably Wolves should have had a penalty. But if you just get 3 points, I mean, people say at the beginning of the season, just get 3 points. But they say during Christmas, just get 3 points. That's all that matters. And they say at the end of the season, just get 3 points. So as long as they win, I think the whole narrative will completely change.
Yeah.
So I think they'll be fine. But from one team struggling to potentially another in Chelsea with West Ham 3, Chelsea 1. What did you make of this game on Sunday?
Yeah, I think credit to West Ham. They really had a game plan going into this game. They knew that Chelsea were going to dominate the ball, and they did. 76% possession for them. But they knew where to hurt Chelsea, and you could tell they had 2 really early chances from their new signing, James Ward-Prowse, from corners. When they're lining the box with Zuma, Aguerd and Souček, that is just going to be their best outlet this season. That's going to be the way they're going to get most of their goals, I think, because he's just so good from a dead ball situation, James Ward-Prowse. But again, I think in this game, I don't think it was particularly a case of Chelsea being bad or awful. I think they were a little unlucky at times. Obviously, Enzo Fernandez missing the penalty would have completely changed the game if he would have scored that. It would have put Chelsea 2-1 up, and we could have seen West Ham potentially come out a little bit more, and Chelsea could have pushed on and won that game. What did you make on it? Do you think it was a case of Chelsea being poor or West Ham being great?
I think it was a bit of both, because it's quite funny because obviously Chelsea took the lead with Chukwuemeka, and it's unfortunate that he ended up going off, what looked like a bad knee injury. Since we've seen a few of them already so far this season, I do worry for him because he's shown like really good promise early on, starting both games for Chelsea under Poch. But I do think that I'm not sure what to think of the Nicholas Jackson up front, because I like him. Everything I see about him, I like. He's powerful. He can run at defenders. He's good carrying the ball, and he's got a good strike on him. Whether he's clinical enough, I'm not quite sure yet. Especially because he hasn't scored a goal yet. You got Nkunku, who's been injured for 4 months, and he might come back into the team around Christmas time. But a 2 or like maybe Nkunku behind it, Jackson, would have been really exciting to see. And I think almost it might even be the midfield. I mean, even with just the 2 of Enzo and Gallagher, and the fact that how often they actually got the ball to him, I wasn't sure that was enough. It was one where I was really confused watching it, because I thought they posed a lot of threat. Sterling was amazing, back to his like old form at Chelsea, where he's really attacking that West Ham defense. But I'm not sure. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, and I think it's one where the performances are a bit disjointed, and they just need to get a few wins under the belt. And might be towards the end of the season we'll be seeing the Chelsea of how Poch wants the side to play. But at the moment, it's not awful, but it's not great either.
Yeah, I think it might just be a case of their new signings sort of gelling, and it plays into a new system as well. Disasi didn't have as good a game as he did in the first game. Obviously, Caicedo came in and gave away the penalty. Not to say that it makes him the worst player ever and the worst signing ever, but I think once he gets starting and playing, that will really help shore them up. I think probably in this one it's more, I'd give more credit to West Ham. I think Antonio looked a lot sharper this game as well. Last week he didn't have a single shot. He didn't really get much of the ball. And this week, brilliant finish. Absolutely smashed it in the bottom corner, which was good to see. And I think it'll be good for his confidence. Hopefully this season he can get a few more goals for them than he has in the last couple. Besides that, I think it was just a case of Chelsea still needing a few more games together as a team, and they should be able to play a bit better than they did.
Yeah, I do agree. I think West Ham were actually really good in this game. Like you said about James Ward-Prowse, I'm so surprised that it took a team in the Premier League to take so long to pay the money to get him, because although West Ham were perfect for him, like you said, with the tall centre backs, midfielders, and strikers as well, I just think it's a match made in heaven, and there's so many more goal scoring opportunities to be had from corners and free kicks that just kind of felt like a bit of a no brainer, really. But I also think that Antonio, while he was good this game, West Ham really need to like try and figure out the next Antonio, because obviously Scamacca's gone to Atalanta now after not working out for a year. He wasn't really the right fit, I think you can never say, because he wasn't going to be like one of those players who's going to run the channels and bully defenders. And I think that's kind of more applied on the West Ham scouts rather than Scamacca himself, because I think he probably will have a good career elsewhere. A bit like Sebastian Haller after he left West Ham. But I do think every year we say to ourselves that, oh, Mikel Antonio, you've got to buy a new striker, you've got to replace him, and then he does the business every year. Eventually, there's going to be a season where he doesn't quite do it. And even though I know we played really well today, I mean, he bullied Axel Disasi in the first half and the second half. And there's one where, like you said, he really struggled. But I think eventually it will catch up with him. So I do think West Ham still needs to sign a striker. Obviously, they're trying Ward-Prowse and Edson Alvarez to hopefully replace the gap in the midfield that Declan Rice has left. And obviously, they're bringing Kostas Mavropanos as well from Stuttgart for a deal reportedly around 20 million euros. So that'll be a good business as well. But I just think maybe another forward player somewhere, especially if, well, it looks like the Paqueta deal is off to Man City now because of alleged betting charges being brought up. So, yeah, I thought they were really good. And then I think another indication of like West Ham will be fine under David Moyes going forward. But you just hope, in the Europa League, maybe they can do something and maybe get far in that competition as well.
Yeah. For next, we got Chelsea. They've got Luton at home. So I think same as United, I think they've got two nice fixtures after their possible difficult games this week, where it would be good to see them play at their best and get a good, comfortable win. And I think that will help them definitely going forward in the next few games. West Ham have got Brighton away, which is a tough one. But if they can play as well as they did against Chelsea, Brighton are really flying at the moment. But if West Ham play as well as they did, they got a good chance.
Yeah, I think that'd be a really interesting game, actually, West Ham Brighton, because I think that's going to be two teams who are going to try and aim to be in the top half next season. Well, this season, sorry. And I think Brighton West Ham obviously were very disappointed with their campaign, but it'd be two sides who play completely different style of football. But it'd be interesting to see the pairing between like De Zerbi and David Moyes and see how that goes. But yeah, well, should we actually talk about Brighton then?
Look at that, so smooth.
Wow, it's amazing. Because Wolves won, Brighton 4. Wolves an XG of 2.14 and Brighton with one of 2.22. And then Brighton actually, despite that XG, I think I felt quite dominated the game. What did you think?
Yeah, I think they did dominate the game and they were probably the better side on the day. But I think 4-1 is quite harsh on Wolves. I think they've had the second game in a row now where they've played really well and surprisingly well, to be honest. I think going into the season, we weren't too sure how they were going to be performing, obviously with Lopetegui leaving and Gary O'Neill coming in. But I don't know what he's done, but every player seems to really be fighting at the moment and really, really pushing. And they're playing really, really well. Like you said, an XG of over 2 against Brighton is decent. They both had 16 shots each as well. So statistically, it seems quite an even game. But I think, like you've said, Brighton did probably deserve the win. They changed their team quite a bit as well, Brighton, which was interesting to see.
3 changes.
Yeah, it was interesting to see Gilmore start in replacement of Dahoud. Webster came in for Van Heck and Enciso in for João Pedro, which I think, if anything, shows Brighton's depth and that they have a really, really good squad. And we'll hopefully get to see all of these different players play throughout the Prem and in the Europa League later this season. It was really some decent goals. Mitoma scored a lovely goal. That first
amazing,
one.
Yeah,
I feel like that was the classic sort of Mitoma we saw last season, just skipping past players, and he had the finish to go with it, which maybe he lacked at times last season. He could have had a few more goals than he did. Lovely goal. And then Wolves, I think after that first goal, they actually came back into it a little bit. Mateus Cunha had another good game. Just really running through. Again, he just seems to be picking up the ball at the moment, just absolutely skinning players. And unfortunately, Fabio Silva couldn't finish. He had a couple chances in the first half. which could have changed the game again. But yeah, sort of later in the game, how did you find it?
Yeah, I want to say, yeah, like Cunha, I thought was absolutely amazing. Because there were a few Wolves fans towards the back end of last season when their obligation to buy him became mandatory, and it was kind of like, oh, not sure we kind of want him. But then he's been showing so far this season how crucial he's going to be. I do think at times he does make the wrong decision. He maybe holds onto the ball for a bit too long, or he makes the wrong pass, or the pass isn't quite executed perfectly to put it into the path of a player. However, you can see the potential in him. You can see he's going to be the crucial for Wolves to stay up this year. But I think that's what we're going to be. They're going to be struggling because they really can't score goals. I mean, Fabio Silva came in this weekend, and I thought he did all right without scoring, but he had a few times where he was linking up the play, especially down the left with Ryan Aid-Nouri, who's a left back who at times is finding himself way up the pitch. But I do think they need a clinical striker because they're really struggling to score goals at the moment. But I thought defensively Wolves weren't good. Because if you watch back the highlights, every single goal, a bit like Man United, there is a player who's on the wrong side and is not willing to bust a gut to get on the right side of the player defensively. And I just think it's going to be one of those where uh, they're just they're just not doing the basics well enough defensively, which was shocking to think of, especially because of the fact that they did so well against Man United. And maybe it was the opposition they were up against. Maybe it's the fact they were at home. They were trying to score a few more goals. They were still trying, even at the back end of the game, which I really thought was like impressive. They're still going for it, still trying to get back into the game. And I thought actually Huang was really good when he came on. He was really a bright spark on that left wing. He came on. And I think it'd be one where he'd be starting next week, getting the goal. He also had another chance, which he tried to create, which was really good. I think Ryan Ed-Nouri as well, finding himself at left back in the box, took a bit of a heavy touch and scuffed it. But I think still some positives to take away from the game, which is still encouraging for Wolves.
Yeah, I think, well, like you said, if they can start getting goals, maybe Huang starting up top next week and start to take those chances, they'll be okay. In terms of attack, anyway, they looked really good in transition and attack, but their defensive transition was really, really poor against Brighton, I thought. Brighton seem to have changed the way they're playing a little bit. I sort of touched on it last week. They don't seem to be waiting for the press a lot of the time. They seem to be, as soon as they win the ball back, no matter where that is on the pitch, they are really pushing straight away. When they first win that ball back, they are pushing and really driving. And then if they lose it, they'll press and then maybe hold on to the ball. It's a really interesting system they've got at the moment. And against both Luton and Wolves, I think 3 out of the 4 goals in each game has come from that transition where they've picked it up, sent it along, or passed it quickly along. And that really good outlet in this game was Estupinian for them, who has had such a good start to the season. He's had a lot of freedom on that left-hand side. It seems with Milner playing in the right back, he's I wouldn't say he's a completely inverted fullback, but he is stepping in quite a lot. And then that allows Estupinian to sort of come round as the wide fullback, and Mitoma sort of pushing very slightly inside. And yeah, he was just such a good outlet for them. He got a goal and an assist this game. And just, yeah, in that attacking transition for Brighton is where they just tore Wolves apart, really.
Yeah, really did. And then on Estupinian, I mean, he was fantastic in the game as well. Like you said, got a goal. And I thought he was so attacking down the left-hand side, really gave Wolves no chance. I think Semedo really had a poor game at right back for Wolves. I think he was really struggling. But then if you talk about, you could talk about any number of Brighton players. You could talk about Enciso as well. You could talk about Solly Marsh, who obviously doesn't get the credits obviously might deserve. 2 goals in the game. Gareth Southgate was in the stands, so you never know. He might be getting a call up. I just thought Brighton were amazing everywhere on the pitch. And then if you talk about the players that they still brought on, Evan Ferguson, Joao Pedro, I mean, they still got so much quality, and it's really exciting to watch Brighton this season. But I did want to get your thoughts on Mateus Nunes' red card. What did you make of it? Or 2 yellows, should I say, sorry.
Yeah, I feel like it was just born out of frustration, really. He seemed to have an okay game, maybe not like as good as we would expect from him, especially he might be being outshone by Mateus Cunha at the moment, but I think they will miss him next game when he's not there. They have Everton away, which could end up being a big game, especially both of them will be fighting for survival. But yeah, I think a lot of it was just born out of frustration from him.
Yeah, I just thought it was really silly from my point of view. I mean, the fact that it was in added time as well, you've already lost the game, there's no way you're coming back. just let it go and move on to the next game, like you said, against Everton. And it's kind of one where I was really disappointed in him because the narrative around Wolves could be that, without Neves, without Moutinho, he's going to have to really step up in that midfield, and it's just kind of feel like he's kind of let that side down a little bit, and especially since he hasn't been the main talisman, because Cunha has really stepped up in this game and been really impressive, that, you just want a bit more from him, and that definitely doesn't help his goals.
Yeah, I agree. On to the next game was Liverpool 3, Bournemouth 1. I thought it was a really good performance from Liverpool, to be honest. After watching it, it was XG of 3 for Liverpool, Bournemouth with an XG of 1.3. Liverpool with double the amount of shots, 26 compared to the 13. And yeah, just my first thoughts on the game. I thought it was a good attacking performance from Liverpool. I think it was the first time we've seen that almost attacking 5 of Liverpool in that sort of W shape. And I thought there were moments where they really seemed to bounce it off each other. They seemed to be forming like an effective attacking unit. Szoboszlai had a really good game. Diaz, I thought, had a really good game. And Gakpo in that sort of hybrid attacking midfield role seems quite interesting. How did you view the game, obviously, as a Liverpool fan?
It's interesting you say that, because maybe because I'm a Liverpool fan, I'm a bit more pessimistic. But I didn't think the performance was amazing. I thought it was good, okay/good from the team, but I didn't think it was amazing. Just because of the fact that Bournemouth took that early lead, and it kind of just felt like everything you already knew, like defensively, were going to be so weak, but it just came to fruition. And like I said, maybe it's the pessimistic in me, and maybe I'm just focusing on the negative. But the fact that it was so early on, and they had a warning before when I think when the left wing, I can't remember his name. I think maybe I can't remember his name, but he was offside, and
it was Anthony.
It was Anthony, yeah. He was offside, and Alisson came running out of the goal, and then he just got the ball and put it past him. And I was just like, "What are you doing?" And then you immediately then give Bournemouth another opportunity. This time it is Van Dijk with the ball in like very far in Liverpool's defensive third, and then he passes it into Trent Alexander-Arnold in midfield. Doesn't control it. Has 2 players about 2 yards either side of him, and then they both just jump on him. And then Semenyo with a fantastic finish. And I thought Bournemouth at that moment in time really deserved the lead. I will say the rest of the game felt like it was more or less Liverpool, with Bournemouth having good counter-attacking opportunities but not really capitalising on any of them, not really converting them into shot-creating actions, or forcing too many saves from Alisson. But it was, now that I'm talking about it out loud, it was better, yeah. I think Diaz, fantastic finish for his goal, flicking it up and then kind of overhead kicking it into the goal.
Yeah, half bicycle.
Bicycle, falling over the other half. And Salah with his pen, which was saved, but then hit the rebound. And that was a bit... It was good that we scored, but there was a lot of people questioning Salah if he should be taking penalties anymore. He's missed something of like 3 of the last 5. He doesn't look too confident when he's stepping up to take them. And it could be one where, Milner obviously should take penalties for Liverpool. Eventually, Salah took over, and it could be one where maybe either Szoboszlai or McAllister. Well, not McAllister.
Not for the next 3 games.
Not for the next. Not for.
Is it 2?
No, it is for the next 3 games. He got a straight red. Although Liverpool are appealing. What did you think it was a red card?
I thought it was a little harsh. I think if I was a Liverpool fan, I would probably be saying it was more towards a yellow. But it's one of those where you see them given, it was the way, the direction of his foot, where his studs were positioned, and potentially the height of where his foot was. It's like a classic orange card, isn't it, as the cliche goes?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it was a red card. I thought it was a yellow. I didn't think it was anywhere near being a red. But that's just what I thought. I did see, I can't remember who it was, but one of the pundits saying the thing is with VAR, and the thing is it a clear and obvious error? If you change it to, is it a red card or is it not? Then you immediately go, okay, no, it's not a red card, and then you have more emphasis to go, okay, to the referee, oh no, this is wrong, and you can still give him a yellow card if you want to. That's fine. But then maybe the clear and obvious isn't. It's kind of making the waters a bit murkier and providing a grey area when there doesn't need to be one. but it was harsh. But I was actually really impressed with how the team responded after going down to 10 men. Actually, maybe thought, they defended much better with 10, and you would hope so. Obviously, Endo came on the pitch for his first Liverpool appearance after we went down to 10. He did all right. He wasn't standing out in too many areas. You didn't really want him to. You just wanted him to be solid defensively. I think he put in a couple of slide tackles, getting to the ball before the Bournemouth man, which I thought was really good. And we even got the third goal after going down to 10 men. Jota with a rebound. But I think the man of the match was Szoboszlai. For his defensive performance, I thought he was fantastic. I mean, the legs on him to be able to run up and down and not look phased at all. I thought he was brilliant.
Yeah, he is one of those players I think can play anywhere. He's that good. He's so technically gifted. He's got such a great range of passing, such good touch, and he is quick and strong, especially for his size. Like you said, Szoboszlai, 93% pass completion, 4 out of 5 long balls, 3 out of 5 dribbles, and 5 out of 8 ground duels. Just a solid all-round performance. And it was really nice to see him in that sort of like right half space. And he's so two-footed. It makes him such an effective player because you don't know whether he is going to be going around the outside or coming in and cutting in and shooting with his left, which is a really dangerous asset. Potentially some defensive questions for Liverpool, like you said at the start.
Yeah.
It wasn't even the case of not having that number 6 because it was from the centre-backs and the full-backs themselves. Just a bit of like lazy passing almost, just a bit naive, I think, against Bournemouth, maybe passing around too slowly, not anticipating Bournemouth to be as pressing as much as they should. And yeah, they deserved the lead. Do you think maybe Endo starting next game could help shore up that defence a little bit?
Oh, I'm not sure at all because of the fact that he's not a conventional number 6, and like in the short time that Liverpool have been linked with him and then signed him, a lot have been said about him. But the fact is, I've looked at his heat maps, and he is very deep. It was Stuttgart last year, but you got to remember in context that this was a team that was struggling in the Bundesliga. They were defending deep in a low block a lot of games last season, so naturally he's going to be in those positions. But he wasn't the out and out number 6, even though he can play there. I think he is very much a stopgap for now. I think because of the fact that you've got Casado, who ended up going to Chelsea, Lavia ended up going to Chelsea. I mean, I think Stefan Bajcetic can play there and probably will be the long-term number 6 at Liverpool. But you've got to remember he's only 18 and they're just coming back of a big injury for someone over 18 a couple of months. So that is a worry. I think Liverpool were just like, you know what, we're not going to get the absolute perfect option that we want right now. And especially after everyone knows now we have 110 million to spend, everyone's going to be overpricing us. And they just went, gracefully they're going to bow out. Well, maybe ungracefully, forcefully they had to bow out and just get someone in for now. I think maybe next summer or in the winter they reassess their options. He could be absolutely fine, but he's not the long-term solution.
Yeah, fine sounds like a pretty decent summary, I'd say.
Yeah.
Not that maybe the world-class signing Liverpool fans were hoping for, but yeah, like you said, a good stopgap for now. Newcastle away next week for Liverpool. That's a massive game.
That is an absolutely massive game.
I'm going to be really excited to watch that and see. I could see it being a really attacking to and fro game because I think Liverpool they're not going to want to have Newcastle passing around their box and sitting back. I think they're just you want to get it to your forwards as quickly as you can, really, because that's where your strengths are at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been a great game to watch. Arguably going to be one of the games of the season if all things go well. But before we move on, I just want to say about Bournemouth because I was impressed with them in the first half of the game. I thought they were pressing Liverpool really well. They were cutting through the passing lanes really well. But I would say what I was disappointed about with Bournemouth was I expected them to have more moments in the game where they were going to be on top, and that never really materialised. I did think to myself that after watching last week's game against West Ham, that under Areola they're going to have more possession of the ball, they're going to be a bit more attacking. And even though they were holding onto the ball better, that didn't convert itself to shock-rating actions or goals. So it is one where I do want to give Areola some more time to implement his way into this team. He didn't obviously come in like immediately in pre-season. He came a couple of weeks in, I think, after the Bournemouth decided to sack Areola. But I think it's one where you wait and see. I think Bournemouth will be absolutely fine this season.
Yeah, I agree. I think maybe even taking the lead that early was not detrimental to a point of Bournemouth getting a result, but maybe the way that they played. I think they got that early goal and they were like, oh my God, we're 1-0 up against Liverpool, the natural reaction is to sort of sit back and try and protect that as opposed to push on and try and get more. Whereas I think, like you said, maybe if it was a draw or they were 1-0 down, they would have had to push out and play with that ball a bit more, which I definitely think we will, and I really hope that we do get to see that from Bournemouth this year. Like you said, we saw last week. It was really good to see, and hopefully they can get a bit more of that going forward.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are expecting really good things, and I really don't want him to get, be in relegation trouble, get sacked early on, because I think, given the time, he could be really good.
Hang on a second there, lads. You seem to have forgotten about something. The biggest part of the episode, the quiz! The Footy Only Connect quiz, back again at half-time. Last week, it was a good week for yourself, Mevin.
It was the massive 1 point.
Yeah, the 1 point gain.
1 point gain. Every little helps.
Made it into a 7-5 lead for myself, as opposed to a 7-4 after I got 0 points.
Yes. I wouldn't say it was the hardest quiz, but we both did out each other. Like this very specific football general knowledge that we don't know.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite hard.
Yeah, we found the gaps, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, if anyone who still doesn't know the rules after all these wonderful episodes, we have 5 players that we give to the other person, and there's a hidden link that is the mystery club that you're trying to find. If you get it on the first player, you get 5 points, second player 4 points, all the way down to if you don't get it, you get 0 points. So let's just crack on.
Yeah, who wants to go first?
Shall I give you my players first this time?
Yeah, go on. I think we did that last week, but yeah, go on.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, I'm still trailing. I need to catch up.
So the first player for this week is Fabio Borini.
Okay, I know him because obviously the former Liverpool man, and I hate the fact you give me him because now it's like, how much do I know about my own player who used to play for my club? Liverpool, he played for Sunderland for a bit, he played for Chelsea for a bit, AC Milan. There was another Italian club, I think it might be Udinese. I'm not going to say Liverpool because if it's Liverpool, I think I would know it from the next few players. So how obscure are we going here? Well, just a guess. Let's go Sunderland.
It's not Sunderland, unfortunately.
Not Sunderland. Okay.
The second player for 4 points is Radamel Falcao.
Radamel Falcao. Okay. Former Atletico Madrid, Manchester United, Monaco centre forward. Did he play anywhere else that I can remember? Did he play in Italy at all? Maybe with Borini, I'm not sure. I think maybe Borini, was he at Monaco when Liverpool bought him? I'm not sure. That's going to come out of nowhere. We're going to say Monaco.
It's not Monaco, unfortunately.
It's not Monaco, okay.
The third player for 3 points is Alex Pato.
Oh my God, Alexander Pato. Right. Obviously, knew him most for his time at AC Milan. And Borini was at AC Milan. Was Pato? Now I'm thinking, was Falcao at AC Milan at any point? Oh, I'm fumbling the bag. Was it? Well, it couldn't. No. Yeah, okay. Let's go AC Milan.
It's not AC Milan.
Oh, no.
And the fourth player for 2 points is Felipe Luis.
Felipe Luis. Felipe Luis. I don't know him. No.
I'll give you a clue for this one. If you don't recognise the name, because you will know him. He's the Brazilian left back.
Oh.
He had like kind of the longish hair.
Oh, he was also Atletico Madrid. Was Pato at Atletico Madrid? So I feel like Felipe Luis was also at Chelsea, maybe. But Falcao might have been. Borini was. Who was the second player you gave me?
So it's Borini, Falcao, Pato, and Felipe Luis.
Was Pato at Chelsea? Oh, screw it. I'll say Chelsea.
He's got it for 2 points.
Oh, my God.
I really thought you were going to get that on the 5 points, and I was so... that is unreal knowledge. You knew he played for Chelsea. I had no idea.
Yeah, well, I know because I knew Brendan Rodgers signed Borini, and he liked him from when he was a coach at Chelsea.
Ah, that's good knowledge. I had no idea. That's why I put him first. Yeah, Falcao was on loan after his loan at Man United.
Okay, yeah, I thought so. When was Pato there?
Pato was also another loan. I don't know the exact year. I don't have it written down, but it was like maybe 14, 15 as a guess.
Oh god, that's more recent than I thought.
Yeah. And then Felipe Luis was the classic. I think he went there for a year, won the Prem, and then dipped.
Yeah, well, to be fair, if you didn't tell me like which Felipe Luis it was, I was just like, oh my god, I'm not gonna get this.
Yeah, I only say because I'm pretty sure you must have known him. And then my last player would have been Torres. But
yeah,
you didn't need him.
No, didn't need him. Thank God. Well, to be fair, that was annoying because also Atletico Madrid, Liverpool, Chelsea.
Yeah, that's why I thought I have a few overlaps because I think you'll know
that
the
was
clubs,
good.
but it might be difficult to sort of guess exactly who.
No, that was good. That was good. That was tough. I arguably should have done better, but it's a good one when you have like multiple clubs it could be, and you're like, you're just reinforcing it after everyone.
And I think the only one who was probably the outlier there was Pato because he didn't play for Atletico. And then Falcao didn't play for AC, I'm pretty sure. So there was like
I wasn't sure where he was before Atletico Madrid. And I'm like, maybe he was at some other Spanish team or where was he in Brazil? Wasn't sure. No, that was good.
2 points, solid.
Yeah, 2 points. I'll take this. Does that mean we're equal?
It does. It
if
does.
You
With
get
a game
zero.
in hand.
If you gave 0. All right. So for your turn, right, the first player for 5 points we're going to go with is Guy Demel.
Demel? I definitely recognise that name. I feel like I've had him on an Ultimate Team once. Demel. Is he Colombian? Or Chilean? I think I might be thinking of Gary Medel, the Chilean from Inter. Guy Demel.
2 different players.
Yeah, let's just go, because I thought of him first, Inter Milan.
That is incorrect.
No.
Okay. You recognise the name. I didn't think you'd recognise the name. Right. Second player for 4 points. Steven Pienaar.
Okay, Steven Pienaar. I know he played for Everton and Spurs, but I feel like that's the 2 obvious ones. Who else did Pienaar play for? I've got a feeling when I was doing one of these last week, Pienaar came up as a player that I was thinking about doing it on. Did he played for someone like Real Madrid or something like that, but I can't quite remember. I'm going to go for Real Madrid.
It's incorrect.
Damn.
The third player for 3 points. Ivan Perisic.
Okay, Perisic comes up in a lot of these quizzes. And I know he played for Dortmund, Wolfsburg, Bayern Munich. He also plays for Spurs at the moment, but I feel like that's too obvious. He played for Inter, which I've already said. Bayern, Wolfsburg, and Dortmund. Let's go Dortmund.
And he's got it.
Yes!
He's got it. Borussia Dortmund.
Come on.
On Ivan Perisic for 3 points.
Nice.
Yes, you did recognize Guy Demel because he is South American. I can't remember exactly which one it was. But he played for Arsenal in the year 2000, 2001.
Oh, I don't think I would have known that. Maybe that was in there somewhere, but...
And obviously Steven Pienaar, he did play for Dortmund early on in his career. Ivan Perisic had 1 year on the Klopp in 2013.
Nice. And
then my 4th player was Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang.
Nice.
And then 5th was Marco Reus. So you
nice. Got it straight away. Nice.
Yeah, I didn't realise you would have got Ivan Perisic for Dortmund.
Yeah, I think it's only because of watching like similar quizzes to this.
Yeah.
He's like one of those players who's played for... He seems like he's played for so many clubs now. And Dortmund's always the obscure one of those, I'd probably say.
Yeah. Because Wolfsburg was like where he probably made his name, isn't it? Yeah.
Nice. We'll take that. 3 points.
Yeah. Well, I got 2, so that's fine.
Yeah, so it makes the scores 10 points to me.
Yeah.
7 points to you.
It does.
Got my 3-point lead back.
Yeah. I think it's going to get harder the further along we go because we're going to be researching so many players. We're going to be like, oh, I recognize him and remember him.
Yeah.
Start off badly, get better as we go on. We're really struggling towards the end.
Yeah, I think as we go on, we'll probably make it tougher and tougher as well because we'll know that each other's knowledge is getting better as well.
Yeah, some obscure Japanese team will be like, I don't remember any of these.
Okay, sweet. Right, that's the quiz and back to the episode.
Let's move on to Manchester City, who are now Super Cup champions before we get into the game against Newcastle. Do you watch much of the game?
I didn't actually. No, I didn't, unfortunately. No, it seemed, I guess, from like the stats and the scoreline, maybe a bit tougher than they were expecting.
Yeah. Again, to be fair, there's a bit of a weird one because I didn't. I watched some of the extended highlights, but I didn't watch much of the game either, and it felt weird. Like even before the game, because no one was really talking about it. It's like, oh, did you know Man City on the Super Cup? And it felt like one where no one really cared about it in England. I think it's because of the aura around Manchester City after just doing the treble. It kind of feels like inevitable and they're going to win everything. So even when they did go 1-0 down to an Enisiri goal, which I thought was a really good header, he absolutely like dunked on Gvardiol and Nathan Ake. I know they're not the tallest left centre back and left backs, But he really looked commanding, and it was a fantastic finish. But it was one where I just kind of felt like Man City wouldn't get back into the game. And even though the fact that they weren't really playing well, and the fact that they went to penalties and won, they just find a way of winning, don't they?
I think that's the thing with the Super Cup. Because it's the Europa League winner, naturally the Europa League is not picking those sort of top clubs. It's those sort of clubs who are finishing 5th and 6th in the league, unfortunately, which makes it, I guess, a bit less exciting of a final. But yeah, as you said, City always find a way.
Yeah, and I think, to be fair, credit to him though, because Cole Palmer, what a finish for the goal. And a young lad who's come in. And I just find it interesting that Pep Guardiola's come out and said that he's either going to be sold or kept, because I think a loan would be perfect. A loan for 1 year to a side like West Ham, where he's actually being linked. I'm not sure how much game time he'd personally get at West Ham with Jared Bowen in front of him, but like maybe another team. So maybe like a Crystal Palace, if a Michael Elise were to leave, which doesn't look like it's happening now. And then you come back the next year, and then you have that right wing position as your own. But I think I find it really interesting that loans are an option. But I think he could have a really great future going forward, especially if he's consistent in that Man City side. And then you would expect, if he's continuously on that side, that he's also going to be an England starter one day, potentially. But let's get into the Newcastle game, because this was a game which was very end to end to start off with. Manchester City were the more clinical side, the side with the more attacking goal threat, and Newcastle kind of huffed and puffed and didn't really get many chances. But I was just, again, Manchester City just being dominant as they always are.
Yeah, I think it was, like we said about Cole Palmer, when you've got Phil Foden sitting in front of you, it's going to be very difficult to get game time if he keeps playing like he did. I think he probably did start off on the right, but as the game went on, he just sort of slowly drifted in and started to become sitting behind Haaland and Alvarez, and he just had a fantastic game. He ran the show for them. Anytime he was getting the ball, he was picking it up and just driving it through. 90% pass completion, 7 key passes, which is crazy. 3 out of 3 dribbles and 7 out of 9 ground drills. Just a really dominant performance from him, and a performance that maybe we haven't seen for a while from Foden, and probably the most likely cause of that is because he hasn't really been given the chance to. So it's really great to see him have a performance like that. Man City sort of set up into the game. Kyle Walker was sort of almost that old classic Kyle Walker. He was really quite wide in that game, I thought, pushing up and down a lot, which was interesting to see. And again, it was another thing we haven't really seen for a while, with Akanji now being the one who was inverting into that Stones role. It was almost, I think, when I was looking at the lineup, this was not how I predicted them to be set up. And then it was Gvardiol and Diaz sitting, who I think were really effective in preventing Newcastle getting into the game too much, restricted them to an XG of only 0.3. But yeah, I think City were on top and definitely the stronger side. Newcastle had a few glimpses of sort of a few spells of keeping the ball and a few good counter-attacks as well. But I think Man City out of the two were definitely the most comfortable, and potentially if they would have found, it was a couple of those sort of last passes they were missing and a few just touches, like from Haaland. He seemed to shoot quite early on a lot of his chances. I think if they could have progressed that ball 4 or 5 yards closer, or had a few more of those classic Man City cutbacks that we see, I think they potentially could have even won it by 2 or 3.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I did find it so interesting, like you said, about Akanji's position, because he ended up being left back, who was then inverting, but then he wasn't inverting alongside Rodri at times. It was kind of Rodri and Kovacic, and Akanji was further ahead of both of them, joining like Foden. And then that's where it was so mesmerizing to watch, because all of a sudden, with a centre back who's playing left back, but in game he's actually like more of a attacking midfielder. I'm just like, these Man City players can literally just do anything. They can go wherever they want on the pitch and just be amazing. And it's really quite interesting to watch, because I don't think Newcastle could really do much about it and nullify them. Because I do think to myself that, that Newcastle midfield of Tonali, Bruno G, and Joe Linton, they could compete with most other teams in the league. But I don't think they can compete with Man City. And especially when you think about the depth of options as well. Because Joe Linton came off and Longstaff came on. And I love the lad, Longstaff, local lad. He tries his best, but he's nowhere near the quality of those other three. So it is one where I did think Newcastle didn't have... They nullified City to an extent, but they didn't have concrete answers for any of the problems that they were presented with. And I think, like Haaland, like I said, on another day, he could potentially have had a hat-trick. I think that is the only thing about Foden's performance, and I'll give it, like, I think he was man of the match. He was outstanding, but that pass to Haaland wasn't the killer pass that you'd expect from a De Bruyne. It wasn't perfectly in this pass, perfectly weighted, and allowed him to get a shot off immediately without even having to take a touch. Whereas with De Bruyne, it's not even a touch; it's just a goal. It's his first strike.
Yeah, it's ready made with De Bruyne. With Foden,
Yeah.
you've got to do a tiny bit of work before.
Yeah, you just got to. And to be fair, even that little adjustment is such a massive thing because Shaw and Bodman did have a good game. I think Bodman on Haaland especially, he had a really good game. Kept Haaland quiet, which is great because he was not my fantasy football captain this week. I went with Salah, a bit annoyed he missed, but then I was happy because he didn't score. And the fact that, even if you keep Haaland quiet, you've still got a player like Julian Alvarez who can just, had a fantastic finish. And Foden, the way the ball stuck to him when he was making that run down the right hand side behind Newcastle defence, and then the cutback, well, it was a short cutback, but then Alvarez with a fantastic finish into the far corner, and Pope had no chance.
I think like you've said, Newcastle didn't really have much of a chance going into the game, and I think a lot of that was Pep had maybe identified where they can sort of suffocate Newcastle. And you saying about Akanji being that sort of furthest forward midfielder despite inverting from left back was really interesting because potentially that may have been to sort of help keep the ball away from Bruno Guimaraes. He is their sort of main player who's going to be picking up that ball, either driving it or knocking it forward. And I think Akanji maybe playing in that role was just sort of stop him having any sort of outlet. And then with sort of your Alvarez or Foden, they seem to interchange quite a lot in that right half space with Walker overlapping. Potentially another weakness of Newcastle would be that left back position, you'd say, in Dan Burn. And a lot of their sort of early attacks in that first half and the goal itself were coming from that side. And I think it was maybe just a case of Man City doing their homework and then just being able to dominate the game from there, from how they set up.
Yeah, and that's frightening because not only can they change players and personnel, but they can also change the tactics. Not even from the beginning, they can change it in game as well to adapt to whatever need they want. And now they've won the first 2 games and they're really flying, and it looks good because they did a really good job of nullifying Alexander Isak. I mean, he barely had a sniff in the game. He had to get substituted for Callum Wilson. You're thinking about Anthony Gordon. Kind of looked like the best attacking creative outlet, but even then he didn't do much. And honestly, he could have got himself a second yellow. So Eddie Howe had to sub him off for Barnes, who I think is a great player, but he didn't do much when he came on. I think Miguel Almiron, he huffed and he puffed, but he didn't do much in terms of clinical attacking play. And then, they just nullified the midfield. Kieran Trippier couldn't get as far forward as he would like because of that threat in behind. So I think it's one where they just absolutely did a job on Newcastle. Newcastle never won at the Etihad. And that's a stat that Newcastle will desperately be wanting to change soon.
Yeah, but I think it's, like we said, for a few of these games, it's just the case when you come up against City, you can't really be expected to win a lot of the time. They've just got to maybe long-term see where things may have gone wrong in that game and pick up some things from Man City of adapting when you're playing the opposition. But I think going forward, Newcastle will still be fine. Still a great side, just unfortunately not their day against Man City.
Yeah. And let's move further down into the Midlands because we have Aston Villa 4, Everton 0, which was a very one-sided game. And I don't think Aston Villa were amazing, and I think it was a bit of they were good and Everton were really poor. It was one where they absolutely dominated from start to finish. Everton didn't have too many big chances to speak of, and they absolutely dominated. And you would expect that after losing to Newcastle 5-1 at St James's Park, and they definitely responded.
Yeah, I was really disappointed in Everton this week because I thought last week they actually played really well against Fulham, and they think they should have won that game. They had 3 or 4 really good chances, and Doucouré and Iwobi played really, really well on that game. And it felt like a completely different side this week. They were hopeless, essentially. So open, so like lethargic, so easy for Aston Villa to cut through. I think Aston Villa played well, but I don't think they had to play at their best to win 4-0, which is really disappointing. Aston Villa XG of 3, Everton 0.6. And Aston Villa had 13 shots, which doesn't seem like a lot on a dominant performance, but a lot of those shots were really well created and really close to Everton's goal, high quality chances. One player who was really surprising was Leon Bailey. He last week was hauled off at half time, And this week he was absolutely running the show. Seemed like a new player, whether he got a bit of a kick up the arse from Emery or he wanted to prove it to himself that that is not the player that he is. 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 out of 2 dribbles, 2 out of 3 duels, and an 83% pass completion, which for a winger is really high. Just looked completely brand new. Really, really good performance.
Yeah, and I think it's one where we saw him do that in the Bundesliga, but what he struggled with when coming to Villa is that having that consistency and doing it week in, week out. I think he definitely must have had a kick up the backside because that was a completely different player to the one we saw. I think that a little bit was helped by the fact that he was playing against Everton. I mean, he was up against Ashley Young, who was at Aston Villa last year, so we should know a bit about him, but he just didn't get anywhere near him at all. And I think the same happened on the other side with Patterson and John McGinn. He didn't get anywhere near his man at all, and he actually let him completely run through for the first goal. And the fact that there were like 4 Everton players around him in the box, but then McGinn was somehow the one that got to the ball first, unchallenged completely, and it was really poor defensively from Everton. But like you said, really clinical finishing from Villa, but also one in which they controlled the game. They did have the majority of the possession, but even when Everton did have possession, Aston Villa still maintained control of the game because they were in areas of the pitch where they were happy for them to have it. And to be fair, they didn't have to do much. They just had to let Everton kind of bring the ball forward slightly, and they were the ones who would be their own downfall. They'd lose it or have a heavy touch, and then in transitions they would just kill them every time. And it was really poor. But yeah, I just really want to make sure we give Aston Villa a lot of credit because you expected a response after getting battered 5-1 by Newcastle, but to win 4-0, I think it was definitely more than the fans could have hoped for.
Yeah, it was a really strong performance. And looking at sort of the average player positions, there was a slight, maybe not a tactical setup change, I would say, but I think whether this was because Everton gave them more space to do so, but Digne really seemed to come into the game this week a lot more. He was absolutely bombing down that left side, a lot of overlapping runs with McGinn sort of slightly coming inside a bit more. Sort of it was almost Diaby and McGinn sitting outside Watkins, Bailey on the right, and Digne essentially being almost that left wing a lot of the time. 10 crosses in the game. Only one was accurate or made into an Aston Villa man, but he was just absolutely whipping them in. And the one that was accurate was that Diaby volley that hit the post.
Yeah, I think Digne had a fantastic game, and it's really surprised me. Like after the fact that he's been linked with a move away to Nice, I think that would be a bit of a miss for Aston Villa. Obviously, they brought in other players to maybe replace him, but the fact that he had so much time and space on the ball in that game, and again, it's really bad on Everton because Patterson was nowhere to be seen, never got close. Garner, who was playing on that right hand side as well, I think he should have got a lot closer. He's a centre midfielder playing out of position at right mid, I understand, but the fact that he got so out of the game so easily, and then he was actually unchallenged at times, didn't he, to put the ball into the box, but still delivered every time, even if it didn't make it to man, was a threat. And another day he could have had a few more goals and assists to his name, and I think Villa, that's probably their season started now. That's them up and running and in a very good fashion as well. I think they need to get Ollie Watkins a goal, and I think all will be good with the world for Aston Villa.
Yeah, it's really exciting because they've still, like we've said, how well Digne's played, and Moreno's still due to come back from injury. But yeah, Watkins and Diaby seem to be playing really well together as well. Diaby's just looks like such a good player. I think he has lived up to the hype of what we saw in Leverkusen already. He looks so energetic, and he's been like everywhere. He's playing that number 10, but he's such a good player. He's just going left, right. He is just swapping, and players are just moving to cover for him when needed. He's really controlling things for Villa, which is really good. And Everton, I think the classic meme, Dominic Calvert-Lewin hooked off for injury, and Danjuma came on. I don't know what you think of how their sort of setup is meant to be, if Dominic Calvert-Lewin has been the plan since the start of the season, and how will Danjuma now be that lone striker?
Yeah, first of all, I do have some sympathy for Dominic Calvert-Lewin because of how the injury occurred. He was really giving it his all, went into a collision with Martinez, and then I don't know if you've seen the photos, I'm sure you probably have, but the bruising on his face afterwards. Hopefully for him and for Everton fans, it's just a bit of bruising, a bit of swelling. Hopefully it goes down with a bit of ice. But if it's any kind of like damage to the actual cheekbone, that could be him out for a few months, and that's the last thing you want after watching your team put in the performance they just did. I did think Danjuma was a bright spark when he did come on. He didn't have a lot of help. He had to really do it on his own. But I think in the first half, there was one where when he's running down the left hand side, he tried to cut inside and didn't quite make it. But I thought it was positive. And I thought in the second half, he had a good 1-2 on the edge of the box and caught Pau Torres sleeping actually and got a shot away. Again, defended by Martinez in goal. I think to be fair, it was a really tough angle. He wasn't going to score from it anyway. But I think him alongside Calvert-Lewin would be amazing. But I just without him, I'm not sure how they're going to score goals. And it does feel like there's been no break for Everton. It feels like the last 3 years, this one being the third one, that it's just a repeat of the same season, the same narrative, and it feels like exactly the same. And I almost feel like Everton fans have had no break and just misery after misery.
Yeah, it seems like the same story. The squad is almost exactly the same. The system isn't far off what it is, and they are having games where they're either playing really badly and getting battered, or they're having games where they're playing well but they can't score. So yeah, hopefully for Everton's sake, Calvert-Lewin can stay fit. And I think that'd be really interesting to see Calvert-Lewin and Danjuma play together. Danjuma, he's not the sort of player to be a lone striker, but playing off someone, either in behind or alongside, could potentially be something that may help them get some goals. I think last week we thought it was just the goals scoring that's the problem, but now it seems to also, a performance like that is a big defensive issue as well.
Yeah, the side of play massively, because as soon as Calvert-Lewin goes off, you do question how are Everton going to try and score a goal, and then you just can't see how they're going to do it. And just to have I don't know, for the game plan to be, we're going to win 1-0, or it's going to be 0-0 the entire game. To have that as a game plan going into a game or a season, it's just, you can't do that for 30 games. You're going to get exposed. You're going to get hammerings like you did against Aston Villa today against better teams. And then we saw what happened last week where it didn't work out. They lost 1-0 to Fulham, who are your challengers for possibly going to be down there in the relegation zone. So how on earth, I don't know, you've got to score goals to win games of football, and that's what's frustrating, because you know Calvert-Lewin has these injury issues. You know he is going to get injured. You can't rely on him. And in fact, you still haven't replaced him. I don't know. It just feels like there's no hope for Everton fans. You want to give them something to get them off the seat, but it just doesn't feel like that's going to happen.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on to Fulham, Brentford.
Yeah, bit depressing, but let's move on.
Let's move on to a good positive result for Brentford. A big 3-0 win against Fulham. Really dominated the game. An XG of 3.9 for Brentford compared to Fulham's 0.4. 17 shots for Brentford against Fulham's 10 and 55% possession. Really strong performance, I thought.
Yeah, another good performance after we watched them draw 2-2 against Spurs. This time going away from home, and you know what? They looked absolutely comfortable. They actually looked amazing, and a lot to be made about are they going to miss Ivan Toney, but they haven't even needed to bring in another player to replace him, because they already had Mbeumo, they've got Visa, they've got Kevin Schade who came in, and I think Schade, he has the least quality at the moment out of all 3 other forwards who started, but I think he's got the highest potential. And choosing a club like Brentford with a manager like Thomas Frank, I think it's a perfect club for him at this moment in time. And I think he's going to develop even more. But the man at the moment, Mbeumo, we've got to talk about him. Another goal from a penalty, yes, but he also did score a goal from open play. And he looks like such a massive threat for Brentford, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, that penalty was... So I think that's probably one of the best penalties I've seen. It had a expected goal on target post shot of 1. So it's just like as good as you can get, really. But yeah, besides the penalty, he is full of confidence, which I think is a massive thing, especially as he's been that player that they look for as not their direct Toney replacement. Obviously, they're quite different players, but the man to lead their forward line, and he's really stepped up. He was playing as he obviously wasn't. What was their sort of setup? It was Mbeumo on the right, would you say?
Yeah, Mbeumo on the right, Wisa up front, and Schade kind of
on
left.
the left. Yeah, it seemed like Schade and Wisa sort of swapped every now and then. And Mbeumo, really, really strong performance again. Brentford haven't sort of... I wouldn't say they've adapted too much without Toney, but they've lost that outlet. I think maybe is the main bit with Toney that they could have lost, as opposed to his goals. every time they're sort of playing that long ball over to Tony, and he is the one to pick it up, and then they move forward. Whereas they seem to have slightly changed that. They're not always going central. They're putting it high and wide a lot more this season. Another really strong game, I thought, from Hickey and Henry, who are their two fullbacks. I think that's such a good fullback combination. Hickey is really, really like two-footed as well, which I think gives them a lot of options. It enables him to either overlap or to sort of invert when needed as well if Mbeumo's sticking out wide. I think Brentford were great, and I think Fulham also made it look a lot easier than it may have been as well.
Yeah, they really did. And like we said, they had a poor performance against Everton last week. Got the win though, so you take the 3 points away from home and you run. But today they were just outclassed by Brentford side, who were just much better than them. And like I said, they didn't help because I think they really missed, like a couple of teams, they really missed a focal point up top. I think Raul Jimenez starting up front did okay at times, but really wasn't effective at all against the centre backs of Brentford. And I thought he really struggled up front. I thought defensively they did look poor as well. There were a couple of times where Mbeumo got behind Anthony Robinson, who I thought he is a good player, but he had a bit of a shocking performance. He couldn't really keep Mbeumo quiet. He was running it behind constantly, and he couldn't keep up with him, which is surprising because he's a bit of an athlete. I think Tete on the other side, if you're comparing fullbacks, also had another didn't have a great game, and it's another one where you expect him to do well. And I just look at that centre back pairing, and I don't think of Issa Diop and Tim Ream, and I don't think is a Premier League quality centre back. I think you're really missing Adebayo. He's apparently Monaco apparently looking to get him in, and I think that'll be a good deal for them. But for Fulham, they really need to replace him with someone. And obviously they've got the Mitrovic money, as he's gone to Hilal in the end. £50 million club record fee they've received. They really need to invest it, and there's a couple of positions that they really need to invest it in. And the only positive thing was that João Pedro was on the bench, so get him back in that team, and then hope for the best that you're going to get some more transfers. And I think that's the narrative with a few of these teams, is that they've got transfer window still open, still got time to make business and do some transfers because they're going to need it for them.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully, Palhinha sort of coming in is going to help shore that up. Maybe we'll see. We know how good he was last season. Maybe these last 2 games have shown how important he is to Fulham, and potentially could turn around. We'll wait and see. Fulham next week have got Arsenal away. Doesn't get easier.
Guaranteed win.
It'd be interesting to see how they set up for that. And yeah, Arsenal obviously playing tonight against Palace, so we don't know the score just yet. But
what I will say is though, Bernd Leno is going to be absolutely crucial for them, as he was last year, and I don't think people really respected how well he did for them until towards the back end of last season, where he was really putting out some top quality performances. But they're going to need him if they're going to stay up this year, because he made a couple of good saves. He made one save from Janssen, I think, at one point, which he tipped it over the bar. But I think he's going to be so crucial. And when you say that your goalkeeper is going to be so important, but in a defensive sense and not in an attacking sense, like we say for maybe like Edison, then you're in trouble.
Yeah, that is a worrying sign. It's a shame for Leno because he's such a good shot stopper. He's one of the best shot stoppers in the league, I'd probably say, but he's not going to be able to play for one of those top clubs. Like, he was pushed out of Arsenal because he's the classic. He's not good enough with his feet, but he is such a good shot stopper, and like you said, he'll probably save a few points for Fulham, I think, this season, which could be crucial when it comes to the end.
Yeah. And then moving on to the final game, Nottingham Forest 2, Sheffield United 1. First of all, sorry, Sheffield United fans. That's the second week in a row you're last in the running order. I can't imagine what that must be like. And I know match of the day must be something pretty similar. So sorry. I'm sure at some point we will talk about you a bit earlier on in the podcast. But thanks for waiting this long if you have. But Nottingham Forest 2, Sheffield United 1. What do you make of it?
I think it was a decent game from Forest. I think Sheffield United weren't great again. I really wasn't convinced by them this week as well as last week. I don't know whether they're obviously still adapting to the league, whether the player quality is not enough. I thought maybe this week with Nottingham Forest being one of the sort of lower teams in the league, they might give it a bit more of a go, have a bit more of a chance. But I think Sheffield United were lucky to get their goal, and Forest deserved the win. 1.4 XG for Forest and 0.5 for Sheffield United. 16 shots for Forest compared to 7 for Sheffield. This was the main thing with Sheffield every time I've sort of seen them play. I just think the way they're set up defensively seems really strange. They're playing with a 5-back, but a lot of the time when Forest are pushing, it doesn't really feel like it. They seem to be, I know obviously really straight, but really narrow a lot of the time, and I think that's why Serge Aurier had such a big impact on this game. He had so much space a lot of the time. It was really strange. He had a couple crosses into the box where obviously El-Neni got his first goal. 6 Premier League games in a row now with a goal. He is going to be their sort of key player for Forest if he can stay fit. It just seemed like defensively just such a strange setup, and it made, like I said, it made Aurier had a really good game. And then going forward just didn't really seem like much from Sheffield. They had a great goal, Harmer, with that whipped it into the top corner. Matt Turner had no chance. And he seems like a decent player. It was his first start this year. He had 9 goals and 10 assists last season in the Championship. Potentially could be an outlet for them, but I just think it's defensively they're really going to struggle this year. What did you make of the game overall?
Yeah, I do absolutely agree that they're so narrow defensively. And if we skip ahead to the winning goal, in which Aurier puts the ball into the box for Chris Wood to score from a header, I do think it's weird in the build-up how I can't remember which one, but one of the centre-backs gets the ball and passes it out to Aurier. But just the fact that you've got 2 Sheffield United players pressing that one player, leaving Aurier completely free, and then there's no left wing-back running out to try and close him down. And I did think that was just like, this doesn't seem right. And I do feel bad for Sheffield United fans because of the fact that the team coming into the league has been made weaker through the transfer window and not stronger. And I think arguably apart from maybe Wolves, it's the only team in the league, in my opinion, which I think have got weaker as a result of the transfer window, not stronger. And it's one where obviously they lost Iliman and Dye, he's gone to Marseille. But in the second half, they brought on Baldock or Basham. They brought in Basham into the midfield, and then they brought in 2 youngsters to go up front. And it just feels like even when they had the momentum after equalising through that fantastic Harmer strike, that they made this team weaker. But because they had no options on the bench and then players were tired, and then what do? Do you just leave the same 11 out every week and week out? You're just asking for more injuries, asking for players to get more fatigue for the next game. And it just seems like one where I am glad we put them 20th in their predictions, because I think even lesser than Luton, they're showing, they're finding it difficult in the league, finding it difficult to score. And I think the worst part is, when they looked at the fixtures, Palace at home, Nottingham Forest away, you thought to yourself, okay, 2 fixtures at the beginning of the season that you should be winnable, or if not, at least get some points in them and get yourself started. And then who knows what could happen, but absolutely nothing from Sheffield United.
Yeah, even if they weren't getting the results, if they were putting in a good shift, especially when they're playing 5-back, you'd think, oh, maybe there's going to be times where their wing-backs are sort of pushing up and attacking. But I just think it was Lowe and Osborne in this game, and I'm not sure what their role was or whether they knew what their role was either. I cannot see any positive from them at the moment, unfortunately. Then a little bit on Forest's positive side, I'd say. I don't think it was all that Sheffield United were poor. I think Forest had a solid game. I think they did dominate it, which was good to see, especially at home. They get a really good atmosphere at Forest, so I think that could be a good thing that sort of helps push them up the table. And then Chris Wood coming on is a great option off the bench, and it was one of those signings where they didn't really want to sign him. Obviously, they were obligated due to the conditions that were met in the loan contract. But I think that's such a good option to come off the bench, and he seemed really happy to get his goal, I thought, which was interesting to see. Maybe someone who knows they're maybe not wanted at the club, potentially isn't going to be a starter with El-Neni playing as well as he is. And to have that option coming off the bench and see him score and be so happy with it was really good to see, and a positive sign for Forest.
Yeah, I think the main thing on the Chris Wood deal is the fact that it was a transfer fee, which they didn't want to pay, which is like in excess of 10 million. And also his wages, I think apparently he's one of the highest earners of the club. And if he's not going to be signing week in, week out, that's an issue. But I think, like you said, an option on the bench, fantastic. Him and Tao El-Neni to have up front, even when they're losing a game, to have 2 forwards to stick a ball into. Perfectly right, especially if you've got Aurier putting in those balls like he did this game. But I think, they were really good for us. They definitely deserved the win, and I'm glad they did, because, bit of an affinity, having gone to university in Nottingham. So,
Yeah.
always want them to do well. But, obviously last week against Arsenal, you didn't expect them to win. And they had a really good last 5 to 10 minutes. It didn't really offer much for the rest of the game. But I think today they really showed that at home they're going to be forced like they showed last season.
Yeah, and both these teams next week have the Manchester clubs. Forest have got United away, where I think they could put up a good performance if they played like they did against Arsenal. Maybe just shored up that defence a little bit and get them on the counter. They had some really good chances against Arsenal. I think that could be the same for next week, where Sheffield United have a home game against City, which is a worry. Could be a bit of a goal fest, that one, if City play as well as they can.
Yeah, I would say the only slimmer of hope, and this is really stretching, is the fact that there's always a newly promoted team beating a top 6 side at home before the first international break.
There's always City as well. I feel like I've got memories of like Burnley beating City, and I think Bournemouth had a draw against City or a win against City.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, but there's always one team that's always, beats them or draws or takes points off them, and you didn't expect it, and all of a sudden, like, oh, well, you never know. I think, like, Huddersfield did it when they came up a few years ago against someone, I can't remember who, but there is always that. I mean, it's only one game, even if they do, and they still need to try and beat the other teams in and around them, which I think, on showing, they've struggled against, so it might be one where, going forward, they are going to struggle, but, like we said, transfer window still open. Still time to maybe give yourself the best chance possible.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Obviously, no Burnley versus Luton. That game's been postponed. That's going to be played at a later date. So only the 8 games to talk about. And obviously, Arsenal versus Crystal Palace at the time of recording hasn't been played yet. But you guys will know what will happen in that game by the time you've seen this. Hopefully, Crystal Palace win.
What's your predictions? About an hour till kickoff now, isn't it?
Is it? Oh, okay. Are Arsenal at home or away?
It is away for Arsenal.
Okay. Selhurst Park, first game of the season for them.
I think it's away anyway.
No, I think it is because you were at home. Arsenal were at home last week, weren't they?
Yeah, we were.
I will say 2-1 Arsenal. I think it's another cagey affair, but I think getting 3 points all that matters. And just getting more points and keeping up with Manchester City, who are flying at the moment. But yeah, that's it for the podcast this week. I hope you guys have enjoyed it very much. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next one.
Cheers.